All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for our second to last Insights from an Admissions Officer webinar. My name is Dave, and I'm an admissions officer here at UC San Diego. I primarily work with students in the local San Diego area. In today's session, our goal is to share helpful information that will help you through the application process and hopefully ease your mind some of the concerns you might have along the way. The content we'll cover is relevant for both first-year applicants and transfer students. I'll be serving as today's moderator, but I am also joined by an admissions officer who will provide additional perspectives and insights as we move through the presentation. With that, let's get started. First, I'd like to share a few quick housekeeping items with you. Today's webinar is being recorded. A copy of the recording will be available in about 2 weeks on our undergraduate admissions events recordings page, so you'll be able to revisit the information at your own pace. We'll begin with some general context and highlight the topics we'll be covering. Shortly after, we'll enable the Zoom Q&A feature. Once it's open, you're welcome to submit your questions as we go. Please keep the questions general, since this session is meant to be as broad and as helpful as possible to all attendees. For personal or case-specific questions, we encourage you to use our Contact Us form so our team can provide tailored assistance. Just a reminder, all submitted questions are visible to attendees. Because this session is just 60 minutes, we'll keep our presentation brief but helpful. We also have the staff we have some admissions officers in the background answering questions in the chat. While they might not be able to respond to every question, you're welcome to follow up with us at our office using the Contact Us form under the resources on our website. We'll be happy to connect with you or direct you to the right campus department. If you'd like to enable captions, click the live transcript icon on your Zoom toolbar and select Show Captions. Also, if we have any family members or other guests joining in, please note that UC San Diego, in line with UC policy, can only share student-specific admission information directly with the applicant. So students, you are the ones who must reach out for clarification. We really appreciate your understanding and cooperation with this policy. Before we dive in, please note that we have only 2 more events scheduled. Tomorrow, we'll be hosting an enhanced campus tour here at UC San Diego. If you live nearby or haven't yet had a chance to visit campus, we encourage you to register and join us. The event will take place after lunch and offer great opportunities to hear from financial aid, housing, dining, and admissions representatives, as well as enjoy a student-guided campus tour. Next week, on Tuesday, November 18th, we'll host our final Insights from an Admissions Officer webinar. This session will cover some of the most popular questions submitted by students like you during registration. The webinar will begin at 2 p.m. to accommodate out-of-state applicants and participants who may wish to join and hear important information. We hope you'll join us for both events. Be sure to register through our events page once today's event concludes. And if you're just joining us or missed any of our September and October webinars, we encourage you to visit the events recordings page on the undergraduate admissions website. Again, that's also under the resources tab. There you can access a wealth of content covering important topics and insights, including how to rank colleges, housing and dining, academic departments, and much more. New content is uploaded every week, so make sure you check out this page regularly. And then when it comes to recordings, I really wanted to highlight our past 2 Insights from an Admissions Officer webinar. We have hosted 2 so far. Again, one was in September and the other was in October. And if you were unable to attend both, the recordings are currently available under the events recordings page. All recordings are timestamped, so if there's specific topics that catch your interest, you can easily skip to that part. Each webinar focuses on different topics based on common questions submitted ahead of the program, like tonight's event. Please note that we try not to repeat topics in webinars. So we can variety of essential subjects. So the less we repeat, the more we can cover. If you still have questions about, say, the college system, we really encourage you to review our past webinars, as well as our dedicated webinar on the colleges posted on September 8th. We're confident that these recordings will answer most of your questions related to those topics. After reviewing them, if you still need clarification, feel free to reach out to us. This approach helps us focus on new questions rather than repeating information already covered. A topic that frequently comes up is housing and dining. Our housing and dining team hosted separate webinars covering the housing guarantee and what to expect when you live on campus. We also strongly encourage you to watch their recording as they are the best source for this information. We will provide helpful links directly from Housing and Dining team, which is the most effective way to get accurate guidance. We encourage you to take advantage of the resources available to you before submitting any questions. We have a dedicated significant time to really curating information that we know will be valuable to you during this process. And then I know I mentioned this a couple of times in the previous slides, but this is a friendly reminder to please submit general questions during today's webinar. Nothing student-specific or very hyper-specific case-based questions. If you need assistance or clarification regarding your individual circumstances, we really encourage you to visit our Contact Us form on the undergraduate admissions website. Again, this is also located under the Resource tab. Here you can submit your inquiries directly or even explore our FAQ section, which addresses many of the common questions and concerns that we receive. All right, so that's enough background information. Let's dive into some of the content here. Before we dive and introduce the admissions officer who's going to join in a second, I'd like to start with a quick snapshot of our campus. We currently have about almost 35,000 undergraduate students, and each year our incoming students break down into two groups. About 2/3 join as first-year students, so right out of high school, and about 1/3 come in as transfer students. And they primarily come from California community colleges, although not all of them do. Our student body is diverse and really far-reaching. Students come from 45 different US states and over 100 countries and regions around the world. Still, about 3/4 of all undergraduates are from California. When it comes for time to degree, our first-year students are typically graduating right on target in an average of about 4 years, and for transfer students, just a little over 2 years after transfer. And finally, I'm really proud to highlight our retention rate, which is 95%, and that's for both first years and transfers. This means that 95% of our students return after their first year, which is one of the strongest indicators of student satisfaction and academic success. To put this into perspective, the national average for four-year institutions is closer to 82%. So we are well above that benchmark. High retention rate really reflects the fact that students feel supported through academic advising, campus resources, peer communities, as well as faculty engagement. It also connects directly to our strong graduation outcomes, since students who stay after that critical first year are far more likely to persist through completion. Well, I wanted to take a moment to look specifically at last year's first year class, so fall 2025. We received a lot of applications, as you can see, from students hoping to join us. Of those, about 28% were admitted, highlighting the competitive nature of our admissions process. The middle 50% range of GPA and test scores of admitted students provides a snapshot of the academic profile for this incoming class. It's important to note that these figures are only for last year. The applicant pool does vary from year to year, so this just gives you a sense of what our incoming students look like academically. And now let's look at our transfer students from last year. So same thing applies. You know, this is only data from last year, but it does give you a good sense of our typical academic profile for admitted students who are transfers. We do receive just a little over 22,000 transfer applications, and of those, about 55% were admitted to UC San Diego. And again, this reflects the competitive nature of our transfer admissions. You can see the middle 50% GPA right here. And again, just want to reiterate, this is from last year. This does slightly change from year to year. All right. So now that we shared a snapshot of our admitted student numbers, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jessica. And Jessica, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It is great to see you, and thanks for spending some time with us. As Dave said, my name is Jessica. I serve as an admission officer here at UC San Diego. This will be my fourth admission cycle with the university, so I've been here for a little bit of time. For when I recruit or work with students in California, I primarily serve students in Orange County, so like Anaheim and Santa Ana area, if you're familiar. And then I also work with students from out of state, particularly in Oregon, Washington, and Colorado. So I am super excited to be here with you all, and hopefully I can give you some specific information or just give you some helpful insights as well as the team behind the scenes answering some questions. I've read applications from all around the world, so I'm excited to be here and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Jessica, and thank you for joining us tonight. And four cycles, you're a seasoned veteran. So we can't wait to get your insight here. So on our next slide, you'll see the various topics that we plan to cover over the next few minutes. We'll keep the information as concise as possible to ensure that we get as much information to you as possible. That way you can make the most out of this webinar. We're now enabling the Q&A feature. So you can questions related to the topics we're discussing. Once again, we do ask that you listen to the content first before submitting your questions, as we may cover the answers during the presentation. So please try to submit questions only if you need further clarification. All right. So Jessica, let's start by talking about the A through G subject requirements. These are the academic preparatory courses that must be completed to be eligible for admission to UC San Diego system as a first year student. You can see those requirements listed on the slide. Our California applicants are most likely familiar with A through G, but I understand you receive a lot of questions about A through G when you are traveling out of state, right? And connecting with those students. So what are some of the important points that students need to keep in mind to ensure they're successfully meeting those A through G requirements? And also, do you have any additional advice for those out-of-state students that are trying to meet these requirements?
Sure, absolutely. So, as Dave mentioned, these are the requirements for first year applications or applicants, right? So, I do get a lot of questions about A through G, and as I've mentioned, when I work with students in California, you all are probably very familiar with the A through G subject areas, right? But if you're coming from out of state, for example, or even internationally, sometimes you might not be familiar with it. So essentially what it is it determines how many years of a certain subject a student has to take. And you can see them all listed on the screen here. I'm not going to go too much detail into it, but just know that they're all listed there for you. So like A is history. Students have to complete a minimum of 2 years of high school history, and the list kind of goes on. Students have to complete a minimum of 15 courses total in the A through G subject areas, but something that I usually tell students to keep in mind is that students do go above and beyond the minimum because we do get so many applications every year, as you kind of mentioned, right? So going above and beyond is always encouraged, right? But 11 of those 15 courses must be completed prior to the last year of high school, and all of those courses must be passed with their C or better. I can say as well, for specific subjects in A through G, some of those courses can be completed in seventh or eighth grade, and those two areas that can apply for is math or language other than English or LOTE. So that's also something to keep in mind as well. And also know that college courses can be used to satisfy A through G subject areas, based on a couple of different things. But we are seeing more and more students doing like dual enrollment coursework or taking courses at a local community college to not only satisfy high school requirements, but to also satisfy A through G. So if that's something that you're kind of hoping to do, that's something that you can also potentially do as well with the A through G subject areas. Now, if you're not in California, for example, and you're not familiar with this, or your school just does not follow the A through G curriculum like a traditional public school would in California, there is still a couple of things that you can do, right? In California, specifically, students, high schools usually have an approved A through G course list. So it's really easy to go in and see what courses apply to certain areas in the A through G subject requirements. But if you're out of state or your school does not have an approved A through G course list, it can be more difficult. But just know that if you are specifically an out of state student, that there is no pre-approved course list for schools outside of California in terms of the A through G requirements, right? So students ask me all the time, well, how can I know which areas apply through A through G? And unfortunately, we don't have a specific list that tells students that exactly as we do in California. But referring to the A through G course list site can also provide guidance on the types of courses that have been approved in the different A through G subject areas. So if you're taking U.S. history, for example, and other schools count it as U.S. history, it could count towards area A. Or if you're taking AP English language composition, that could count towards area B. Or if you're taking AP calculus, like that's area C, and kind of so on and so forth. So that might kind of help you guide that in terms of the specific areas for A through G specifically. So it's okay if your school does not follow A through G curriculum to an exact science, right? But sometimes it's important to know what it is because in the actual UC application, it's going to break it down by A through G subject area. So you're going to have to go in and specifically enter your coursework that way. And also, I get the question a lot of, well, if I'm not taking my courses at a California community college, or I should say college courses at a California community college, how do I know what's transferable and what isn't? And we'll touch on transferability in a little bit, but just know that there's no official way to determine what is or what's not transferable until you submit your application. So if you are taking college coursework, you are required to report all those courses in the college section of the UC application, even if you don't know if it's going to be transferable or not. And that can go for even students taking coursework at a four-year institution, for example. So make sure to report that all that college coursework. You will be required to send college transcript if you do end up attending a UC school. So you don't have to worry about that until this summer, but know that you will have to send that eventually when you do end up attending a UC school. So hopefully that gets you a little bit more familiar with A through G subject areas, but it also leaves you with a couple different ways to look into it if that's something you're not familiar with. But the websites go into way more detail about A through G subject areas. So know that that's usually what information I give students both in state and out of state.
All right. Thank you so much for that detailed explanation, Jessica. For more details, students can visit the resources Jessica referenced to find more details about the A through G subject requirements, which a bunch were dropped into the chat. I also would like to add that international students are also required to complete A through G requirements. However, there are a couple of differences that I'd like to highlight. So, like in place of U.S. history, courses in the history of the country that you're studying would count. For English requirement, 4 years of composition and literature in which you, in the language in which you are instructed, will also fulfill that requirement. So there are a couple of differences, but for the most part, international students are still complete those same A through G course requirements. So our next topic will be about applying undeclared. So I get that question a lot myself at college fairs and school visits. Now, because we receive a lot of those questions, can you talk about what students who are considering applying for undeclared should keep in mind through this application process?
I can, yes. So let's start with can you apply undeclared? Or just let's just start with that question because I also get a lot of questions about this topic too. First year students, if you're applying as a first year applicant, you can apply as an undeclared student. So I get that question a lot. Transfer students are not allowed to apply as an undeclared major. So if you are applying as a transfer student, you have to declare a major in your application. So know that you have to do that if you are applying as a transfer student. So, and it also, I get the question of, is it going to negatively impact my admission if I apply as an undeclared student? And honestly, the answer is not necessarily. So, it's not going to necessarily hinder your chance of being admitted to UC San Diego if you apply as an undeclared major as a first year student. But something that I do tell students to keep in mind is that we do have something on our campus called a selective major. And what that means is those majors tend to be more popular in our applicant pool. So we have to limit the amount of students that we enroll into those majors specifically to make sure that students can still get their classes and graduate within a timely manner, right? So the selective majors can change year to year usually. But for this year, if you are applying to UC San Diego for fall 26 admission, those majors include data science, public health, and most of the majors of the Jacob School of Engineering, which does include computer science, right? So if you are interested in one of those selective majors, my recommendation would be to apply to that selective major. So sometimes students ask me, well, can I just apply to undeclared and then just switch into it if it really is that competitive? And the answer is if you're not admitted to a selective major at the time of admission, you are not guaranteed to be able to switch into that selective major, right? Because there's usually a few different criteria that you have to meet in order to apply to switch into those majors. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of going through the application process. Also, know in the UC application, there are two different majors that you can put for consideration, and that goes for both first year and transfer. So, for first year students, we usually recommend to put that selective major as your primary or first choice for first consideration. And then you could put a non-selective major as your alternate choice to increase your chances of admission to the university. Obviously, you don't have to do that. The choice is completely up to you. And know that that is something that we do recommend. If you're not interested in one of those selective majors, or you're just really unsure about what you want to do, you can apply as an undeclared major if that's something that you're hoping for. You do have to declare a major by the end of your second year, usually. So that's typically the timeline that you have in order to declare a specific major at UC San Diego. We do have over 160 different majors, so there are a lot of options to choose from because usually the selective majors are a very small group of majors on our campus, but there are so many options to choose from. So you still have quite a bit of flexibility in terms of like different programs that you would want to either select or kind of explore. So you do have a lot of flexibility there. I just usually tell students to keep that in mind for those selective majors on the first year side of things. So just kind of keep that in mind. And usually students will also ask me too of like, well, what if I apply to this major? And what if I do this? And they start playing the what if game of like, if I apply to this, will this increase my chances? Or if I apply to this major and not that major, will it increase my chances? And I'm going to be honest, what I usually tell students is just put what you're interested in because honestly, we want to see what you are hoping to be considered for in terms of admission in the admission process. So, and that goes for both first year and transfer, right? So, put the majors that you are interested in, and then those will what we consider you in the application process and you'll see what happens, right? But if you are in a situation where you truly don't know what you want and you just kind of want to explore all these different options, applying undeclared as a first year student is something that you can consider. But if you know what you want to do and you know what your major is and that's something you want to be considered for, and hopefully you'll get admitted, crossing my fingers for y'all, at the time of admission, then my recommendation would be to put the major that you want, because then we can hopefully admit you into the major that you want and you can kind of go from there. But that's usually what I tell students when we talk about applying undeclared and which majors should I put for consideration on the application.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Jessica. You bring up a lot of great points. One of the things I want to just like emphasize that you said is, it's that common perception that students can and declare it as a way of getting around the selective major process. if you go in with that mindset, it's not generally going to work out for you, just of how difficult it is to switch into those majors when you're on campus. So if you are admitted undeclared, kind of, and you're considering weighing your options, uh, please do so with the expectation that you're likely not going to be able to switch into these selective majors when you're on campus. And then in general, when talking about undeclared, and how it might impact admissions. Again, like Jessica shared, it depends. Like selective majors are that one thing where you really want to consider if that's something you're interested in to list that and not do undeclared. But for the most really okay if you don't know what you want to study yet in college. You don't have to have your life figured out in your senior year of high school. Um, all right, so we're going to go on to our next topic, um, where we will focus a little bit on transfer credit. And it's kind of a recent trend that first year students are graduating with just more and more and more college credit. So we do receive a lot of questions about transfer, and not all from transfer students. We're going to tackle this topic in two slides because how we handle transfer credit to UC San Diego will be different between courses you take at California community colleges and those you take at other institutions. So, Jessica, could you talk a little bit about what transfer credit looks like for specifically for students who are taking those courses at a California community college?
Sure, yes. So I get questions about this from both first year and transfer students about, do you accept college credit? What does that look like? How do I know what's accepted and what's not? And all of those different things. So I'm gonna start talking about specifically AP and IB credit because I see that for both first year and transfer students, right? Transfer students, you might have completed some AP credit in high school that will carry over as you apply as a transfer student, or even I see some students with IB coursework too, right? So generally for AP credit, you have to pass the exam, right? So if you score a 3 or higher on the exam, you will earn some sort of credit. In some cases, the higher the score, the more credit you earn, right? So that's just kind of across the board, whether regardless of when you took the exam, right? So that's generally the rule of thumb for AP. For those that have IB coursework or that are in IB curriculum, I usually get questions about like, do we get credit for these test scores as well? So we award credit for higher level exams only. So just kind of keep that in mind, but we do award credit for those exams. So if you score a 5, 6, or a 7 on those higher level IB exams, you will earn credit for that as well. Also, if you are earning the IB diploma, you will earn credit for that too. So know that those IB exams can award some sort of credit as well. Um, those credits can be applied to different things. It could be applied towards general education requirements. It could be applied towards major preparation or major requirements, whatever the case may be, based on the type of credit that you're earning. For what's nice about AP is that the UC system has an AP chart that will show you the exact credit that you would get based off of the test that you took and the score that you earned. So UC San Diego does have an AP chart which we can drop in the chat for you all. And that will show you what kind of credit you're coming in with for AP. So you can also use that too. Something to keep in mind is if you're taking the same type of or same subject with different tests, we usually only award credit for one. So if you take like AP English, for example, and you take IB English and you pass both of those tests, we'll only give you one or the other. So if there is duplication of credit, you usually get one over the other. So the AP chart will give you way more information about that specifically. And then in terms of California Community College credit. So I usually, if a student is enrolled in dual enrollment, for example, and we'll talk about coursework out of state in a second, or from other four-year institutions. But specifically for California Community College, there is a website that's called assist.org, which will tell you how your courses from a California community college will transfer to a public four-year institution like UC San Diego. So if you go on assist.org and you take a look at what's called the UC transferability page, that will show you the courses that are what we call UC transferable. So if the course is UC transferable and you do earn a grade of C or better in that class, you will earn credit for that particular class. And then if you are a transfer student, usually students use assist.org to also look at what's called the articulation agreements, which will show you the courses that you should be taking based off of the different programs that you're hoping to apply for, right? And that can kind of help you guide in terms of like if you're trying to meet certain major prep for mechanical engineering, for example, it'll show you what Math 20A or Calculus 1 on our campus is equivalent to, let's say, at San Diego City College, for example. So it'll tell you what those courses are equivalent to at your California Community College so that it can also help guide you in terms of what types of classes you should be taking. So this is also really important for like transfer major preparation requirements, for example. So keep that in mind. Hopefully, you're familiar with that already or you use it as a tool to kind of help your transfer journey, but you can also meet with admission officers like myself to kind of go over the articulation agreements. What classes should you be taking? Are you on track to transfer and all of those things? Or if you're a first year applicant that's thinking about going the transfer pathway, so if you know that you want to go to a community college first and then transfer over to us as a junior level student, that's also something that you can do as well and use assist.org to help you with your transfer journey. But that website is really good in terms of showing how courses in at a California community college will transfer to a public four-year institution. I use it all the time, so hopefully you all will too if you're taking coursework in California.
Excellent. Yes, a lot of great information there. A couple of things to highlight: that AP/IB credit chart that we have is key, and it will help you figure out how your AP exam scores will transfer. And then for the California community colleges, again, assist.org is your go-to resource for that, your definitive guide. And in that same on that same note, we also like to share kind of what assist looks like a little bit, so that you get a sense for how to use it. So this is a list of the transfer course agreements that we have, and this one specifically we took from San Diego City College. So it lists exactly here what will transfer, and then it'll also give you how many units will transfer if it meets any of the areas that you need it to, specifically for transfer students. You know, like here, UCM, that's one of the courses required for the 7-course pattern. And you'll also see that there's certain limitations to the credits too. You can see the key over here on the left to show you certain limitations there might be for the credit you're receiving. And then I also wanted to show an example of the articulation agreement and kind of what it looks like. So this is specifically, again, from San Diego City College. This articulation agreement was with our computer science and engineering major. You can see it has the list on the left-hand side of the course at UC San Diego, and then on the right side, it shows if San Diego City College has a that we deem equivalent to that. So you can see out of this group, only CSE 8A has an equivalent course at San Diego City College. So that you know, if you take that course at UC San Diego, at San Diego City College, that will count as CSE 8A at UC San Diego. So thank you so much. And I did also, there was one thing I forgot to plug when we were talking about, selective majors. We did have our October 2nd webinar went into depth on the difference between selective and screen majors. So I did want to give a quick plug to that. So let's continue our conversation about transferability of credit. Now, Jessica, what if a student took courses outside of the California community college system? How does transferring work in that situation?
Sure, yeah. So I get this question a lot of is there equivalent to assist.org for out-of-state coursework? What do I do if I'm applying from another four-year institution? What do I do if I took courses at a four-year institution? Or Washington has their Running Start program, which is very similar to dual enrollment, or like Colorado has concurrent enrollment, for example, that's at a community college but not in California. So I get the question of like, well, what does that look like? So my answer is there is no formal agreements for four-year institutions, right? Or out-of-state coursework completed at other community colleges. So unfortunately, there is no assist equivalent for that type of coursework. So usually I tell students there still is a few things that you can do, and I have seen credit transfer from those institutions before. But the only way to get an official evaluation for transferability or if the course is UC transferable is to submit your application. We don't do any like pre-evaluations of non-California community college coursework. So the only way to get an official evaluation of UC transferability is to submit your UC application. So that's how we're going to officially evaluate that coursework, right? So kind of keep that in mind. But usually I tell students the rule of thumb is if the more general the course, the higher chance of it transferring. And if UC San Diego offers a course that's similar, the higher chance of it transferring. If we're talking more about specific courses, then it has a lower chance of transferring. So if we're talking about like Introduction to Psychology or Calculus 1 or English composition, for example, that has a higher chance of transferring because it is more general and I know we offer courses that are similar, right? But if we're talking about like underwater basket weaving or political theories through the lens of Grand Theft Auto gaming, maybe a little bit more narrow in terms of like the subject that's being offered. So maybe it has a lower chance of transferring. But you can use the suggested resources as a guide to get a sense of what will transfer. And you can compare sometimes course descriptions if you would like to go into that depth of it. So you can use those resources if you'd like just to see if there's offered or something similar. But I think in this sense, submitting your UC application will get that official evaluation. Just know that we can't evaluate the course before you submit it. So we can't guarantee that the course will transfer, but know that we will do a full evaluation of the application and take all those courses into consideration. So just kind of keep that in mind, even if you are, a transfer student applying from another four-year institution or out of state, we will do that full evaluation when that application is submitted.
Thank you so much. And actually, underwater basket weaving sounds like a fun class to take. But yeah,
It
you're right.
does, right?
Fortunately, probably wouldn't transfer. Basically, to recap, non-California community colleges, whether it's out of state, in-state, four-year institutions, it's a little less straightforward than our California community colleges. And unfortunately, we can never give like 100% guarantee that a course will transfer. And because we receive so many inquiries, we're unable to do that pre-evaluation, like Jessica said. It is kind of up to the student to do a little bit of legwork to figure out what is likely to transfer and what courses might satisfy things like major preparation. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to stop talking about transfer credit and we're going to talk about research experiences. So let's talk about some of the research opportunities on campus. I mean, UC San Diego is a top-ranked research university that's part of the world-renowned University of California system. And as a research institution, we're sort of at the leading edge of discovery and innovation. We receive about $1.7 billion in research funding annually, and we really invest this money into state-of-the-art facilities, resources, and opportunities for students. So, Jessica, can you talk about what research looks like on campus and how students, and some of the ways that students can get involved?
Yes, absolutely. This is one of the most popular questions I get is, what does research look like? Can I do research? Are undergrads eligible to do research and all these different things? So this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because UC San Diego does some amazing and incredible research. So hopefully you all will take full advantage of that opportunity if you end up attending UC San Diego, because as Dave said, we are a tier one research institution. So there's a lot of opportunity as long as you take advantage of what's in front of you. And I think something important to note is that research opportunities are available across all different types of disciplines, right? So there's something in every area of interest. So you don't necessarily just have to be a STEM major in order to do research. And while there is a lot of opportunities for research in STEM specifically, there is also a lot of research outside of the STEM field as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get connected in terms of research, regardless of whatever discipline or area or subject that you're hoping to do research in, right? So there's a couple different ways that you can get involved in research. One of the most popular ways is to connect directly with faculty or explore department websites to find lab openings, research assistant positions, or independent study projects, right? One thing that the university does offer is they offer a program called Coffee with a Prof, where you can literally get a coupon from some of the colleges in the UC San Diego University, and they will pay for your coffee to be able to sit down with your professor and have conversations with them. So you can ask them about their research, you can ask them about their specific interests and their lab experiences and all those things, or just get advice about like, how do I get connected with your type of research, or do you have a spot open in your lab, and all those different things. And faculty and professors are required to host office hours, and sometimes they tell me that they're just kind of sitting there waiting for students to interact with them. So I highly recommend not only utilizing office hours to get your questions answered about the curriculum and the material, but also get to know them and what their research is, and because a lot of them are doing research in their own specific areas. And that goes for if you are a first year or transfer student, right? Just kind of getting involved with them and reaching out and seeing what's available in that particular area. So you can also gain hands-on experience. So you can conduct the research itself, you can present at conferences, and you can even get published. I've worked with quite a few students that had published articles out before they graduated with their undergraduate degree, my sister being one of them. So that's also something that you can do, right? And like I said before, there's multiple pathways to get involved. And even for transfer students specifically, they have specific dedicated staff to get transfer students involved in research through the Triton Transfer Hub. They have an undergraduate research coordinator. So they can specifically help transfer students get connected to research as soon as your first quarter, right? So that's an amazing resource to take advantage of. One example of an opportunity to get published is through the Saltman Quarterly in the School of Biological Sciences that publishes undergraduate research. So that's also something really awesome to take advantage of. But there is a specific office on campus to help any student get connected to it, and it's called the Undergraduate Research Hub. This office can specifically connect you to research opportunities throughout the entire university. And our team just dropped a link in the chat to their website. So thank you for doing that. I don't have time to go over everything that they do, right? Because they are amazing. But some of the things that they do is called the SRP, or the Summer Research Program, which is a summer program providing research experience, mentoring, and networking. The Empower Scholars Program also exists for community college transfer students who have declared an engineering major. And it's also designed for underrepresented students to get research experience. They also have the McNair program. They have so many different opportunities. They have the faculty mentoring program. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and those are just a few examples that the URH has to get students connected to different programs and research. So I highly recommend taking advantage of it. Really quick, I'll just tell a really quick example of something that one of my students does that I work with. She's in a class called Psych 199, which is a research-based course where you have to pick your own research topic, go out into the field, conduct that research, and come back at the end of the term and present your research findings. So she was interested in studying the psychology of dolphins and how they interact in a performance-based setting with humans. So she went and did research in SeaWorld, which is in San Diego, and did her research with the dolphins and the trainers there. She did that for almost an entire year and then came back and presented on her findings for her research capstone project. So that's just one example of something that I know students do in with real hands-on experience. But again, there's so many different opportunities. So I highly, as long as you take advantage of what's in front of you, there's always either something to do or a lab to be a part of or all those different things. So
Yeah, and Jessica, you bring up a great point, and thanks for all the great information you just provided. It's like it's important for you to go and take advantage of those opportunities. So, like, they're there, but they're not going to come knocking on your door, right? You got to go out and take advantage of those. Doing research is a critical experience in college because to come up with a research question, gather your sources, come up with a methodology, analyzing and interpreting that data, and then communicating those findings. It's going to give you important skills that are going to serve you well in whatever career pathway you get into, like critical thinking, problem solving, key communication skills. So it's really encouraged that students take advantage of that. Also, something unique to UC San Diego is that our co-curricular record will allow students to highlight some of these experiences on their official transcript. So we're going to move on and talk about application information. So before we wrap everything up, I want to point out that we are less than 3 weeks away from the application deadline. If you haven't started your application or you are still in the process, we really strongly encourage you not to wait till the last day to submit, right? Give yourself some time in case there are tech issues or something happens, right? You don't want to miss that deadline. So, Jessica, could you walk students through the application process and kind of highlight some of the key details that they should keep in mind?
sure, yeah. So hopefully, some of you are familiar with the UC application already or have started it if you're planning to apply for fall 26. But the application does open in August of every year. So students can start working on the application as soon as August 1st. As Dave said, December is approaching very quickly, so students have from usually October 1st to November 30th to submit the application. But for this year, we're giving students an extra day, and they have until December 1st to actually submit the application. That goes for both first year and transfer students. I got a question a couple times of, does that apply to both populations? Yes, it does. For both first year and transfer, everyone is due December 1st. And as Dave said, don't miss that deadline because the UC system is a very deadline driven system. So there really are not extensions offered or granted unless it's an extremely extenuating circumstance. So we know life happens, right? But usually, as Dave said, I tell students try and submit it a few days before Thanksgiving, maybe. So that way you can enjoy the holiday if you celebrate and you don't have to worry about this impending deadline coming up for the UC application. It is an $80 fee per campus to apply if you are within the US. And then if you are an international student, it is a $95 fee per campus to apply. Something that I think a lot of students don't know, which hopefully you all will now, is that there is an application fee waiver. So if you do qualify for an application fee waiver, you get to apply to your first four UC campuses for free. So if you do 80 or 95 times four, that's a few $100s saved in your pocket for application fees. So in the UC application, you'll fill out your family's financial information or whoever's fiscally responsible for you, right? And then it'll let you know if you're eligible for a fee waiver in the actual application. So a lot of times students ask me, well, can I just skip the financial information? You can, but then you won't know if you qualify for a fee waiver. So definitely fill that section out to see if you qualify for a fee waiver. And if you do, then you can save some money in the application fees. I should also mention we don't do early action or early decision at any point in the admission process. So it really is just submit it within that submission period. And then once that deadline passes, we start reading. And then once your application is received by each UC campus that you're applying to, you'll usually get an email that says, "Thank you for applying to UC San Diego. We've received your application. Here's the information to create your applicant login for your applicant portal." And so that's when you can create a live or your specific password for the applicant portal. And then that's where you're going to get more information about the university. And that's also where your admission decision is going to be delivered. So just make sure to look out for that for any email that comes to you after you submit the UC application. Once that December 1st deadline passes, we start reading, and then in the following year is when you'll find out if you've been admitted. So for first year students, you'll find out by the end of March if you've been admitted, and then you'll have until May 1st to decide if you want to attend. For transfer students, you'll find out if you've been admitted by the end of April, and then you'll have until June 1st to decide if you want to attend. So that's typically what the application timeline looks like. If you're applying at a later date, so if you're applying for like fall 27 admission or later, just know that this timeline stays the same every year. So this is typically what it's going to look like when you get ready to apply to the UC system. Something to note for transfer students specifically, last thing I'll mention about this is there is something that's called the TAU or the Transfer Academic Update Form. In that form, you will have to fill out in order to let us know your fall grades and also any updates to your spring schedule. So that'll be released sometime in mid-December, and then the priority deadline for that will be January 31st. So that only applies to transfer students, if I have any transfer students in the room, but just so that way you're aware that that's part of the application process as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Wonderful information. While we're on the topic of the application, in past webinars, we covered key things to keep in mind for your UC application. You covered a lot of them but in our next slide, we have a couple of items that students should pay attention to. So if you don't mind, Jessica, like going over a couple of those that maybe we haven't mentioned so far.
Sure. So I think these tips or key things to keep in mind can apply to both first year transfer or even international students, right? So I think this can apply to everyone, which is review your application carefully. So there really isn't a lot of things that you can change after you submit your UC application. So that includes like updating your activities and awards, updating your personal insight questions, or updating your academic history or coursework. So making sure that everything is accurate before you submit is going to be super important, right? I get questions a lot of like, well, can I update this or can I update that or I forgot to include this? And by the time you submit the application, it's too late for that. So make sure that you include everything in the application and that everything is reported accurately, especially your grades and coursework, right? Then that can go for any applicant. Usually my recommendation is to have your unofficial transcripts side by side with your UC application to make sure that everything is reported accurately and correctly, because it can be really hard to remember what classes and grades you got from courses that you took maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So having those documents open side by side with your UC application is going to be super important, because then having those reported correctly will ensure that your application is reviewed correctly, right? And also something to keep in mind is that UC San Diego does not consider SAT or ACT scores in admissions, so we are test free. Students ask me all the time, well, can I still send them? Are you going to look at them if I try and send them? And the answer is no. We will not take a look at those at any point during the admission and application process. You can use those for placement though. So after you're admitted to the university, and if you decide you want to come here, you can use those to get placed into higher level courses, for example. So if you score high enough on the math section of the ACT or the SAT or score a high enough score on the English section, you can get placed into a higher math or English course. So you can use it for that, but we will not take a look at it during the application process. We also do not accept or review any supplemental information during the application process. Things like this can include letters of recommendation, letters of demonstrated interest, resumes, or anything like that. The only things that we can take into consideration are the things in the UC application. So my mentor always says, if it's not on the application, it didn't happen. So if there's something that you want us to know about you or an experience that you want us to know about or something of that nature, right? Make sure it's included in the application. Because if you don't, it could be a very much thing that happened in your world, right? But if it's not on the app, it didn't happen in mine. So just make sure that everything is included in the application that you want us to know, because we can't take a look at any supplemental information. And after you submit, like I said, you can't make changes to your academic records. You can't make changes to the activities and awards sections of the application. The only things that you really can change after submission is like your preferred name, your date of birth, social security number, email address, basically personal information. That's basically the only things that you can go back in and change. And once you submit the application, you can't unsubmit or submit a duplicate application. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're finishing up your applications if you end up applying this year or when you're getting ready to apply to the UC system. But those are just a few things to keep in mind as you're going through the application process.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica. And just to reiterate a couple of points here. Again, when you submit that application, you can't retract it, and you can't submit a duplicate application. Um, Basically, duplicates are just automatically canceled. And an important note, like when we said by the end of March or by the end of April, just keep in mind that not all UC campuses will release their um, uh, emissions decisions at the same time. So just because, say, UC Irvine releases theirs on one day doesn't mean, our decision release will be that same day or even a couple of days after, right? We're all operating on our own timeline. Um, and then again, after the admission, after submitting your application, as Jessica had mentioned in the previous slide, that you'll want to use your applicant portal, and then especially at the time of decision release, that becomes important to monitor consistently. All right, so um, thank you so much for joining me tonight, Jessica. We covered a lot of great information today, a lot of ground, and we hope you found a lot of the information that we covered valuable. Don't forget to check out all of our past recordings for additional guidance and tips. And if you haven't yet, we also encourage you to sign up for our final Insights from an Admissions Officer webinar next week, November 18th. We hope you feel really confident about submitting your application, and we really look forward to seeing you, hopefully, at UC San Diego this fall.